You're welcome back. Two elderly sisters were evicted earlier today from the Dublin home where they had lived for over 80 years. Eileen and Rose Blackhall have been engaged in a 7-year legal battle to prevent their home being sold so that their brother's family could realise the cash value of his share. The Blackrock house is valued at £2 million.
I live with my sister Rose, and I've lived here since 1916, a matter of 82 years.
When Eileen Blackhall's mother died in 1977, she left this Dublin house, Marino Park, to Eileen, her sister Rose and their brother Gerard. He wanted to sell the house and split the proceeds. The sisters objected and a complex legal wrangle ensued. When Gerard died in his early 80s in 1994, his second wife Iris continued the litigation. Eventually the High Court ordered that the property should be sold to a developer for £400,000. Today, the sheriff's bailiffs arrived to enforce a court order for possession so that sale can proceed.
They told me that they had come to take possession of the house. I asked them, my sister had an appointment in the forecourts, and I asked them to wait until her return. They said they couldn't do that the matter had gone on too long.
Following the eviction, Iris Blackhall, Gerard's widow, took possession of the keys of the house so the sale can go ahead. She declined to clarify details of the £400,000 contract to sell Marino Park. The irony of this sad tale is that another developer has offered the family £1 million for the property, along with a guarantee that the Blackhall sisters can live out their days here. Given that offer, the sisters can't understand why the property is going to be sold for £400,000, particularly as they insist that they, as part owners, have never signed a contract of sale.
Who are the vendors? We're the vendors. How could there be a contract if the vendors didn't take part in the contract?
However, legal sources stressed that a court ordered today's eviction. They add that the High Court approved the £400,000 contract of sale to a builder despite the sisters' resistance, and that if that contract were not enforced, the developer could sue. Eileen's sister Rose got back just after the gates were locked. What exactly are you going to do now?
Well, to be kind of with you, I'm kind of in what's known as a state of pulverization.
Rose returns to court tomorrow in a last-ditch bid to overturn the eviction. Ingrid Miley, RTE News, Blackrock.
Appeared before the Supreme Court in an attempt to overturn their evictions. Rose and Eileen Blackhall were represented before the court by a family friend, John Clarkin, who sought time to brief legal counsel and finalise legal argument. Following a 3-minute application, the case was put back for mention until Friday.
This Dublin house, Marino Park, was left to Eileen and Rose Blackhall and their brother Gerard in 1977. Gerard wanted to sell the house and split the proceeds. The sisters objected and a complex legal wrangle ensued. When Gerard died in his early 80s in 1994, his second wife Iris continued the litigation. Eventually the High Court ordered that the property should be sold to a developer for £400,000. Yesterday the sheriff's bailiffs arrived to enforce a High Court order for possession so that sale could proceed. The two sisters, both in their 80s, were evicted. Today, Rose Blackhall came to the Supreme Court seeking a stay on the High Court decision of September the 3rd. A family friend, John Clarkin, addressed the court on the sisters' behalf. He sought a week to secure legal representation and finalise legal arguments to try and overturn the eviction. Mr. Justice Murphy said that the court was pretty familiar with most of the proceedings involving the Blackhalls over the last 4 to 5 years. He asked whether these proceedings involving the Marino Park house had not been litigated to exhaustion, with significant injustice to parties other than the sisters. He mentioned their sister-in-law and their late brother Gerard. The court decided to put the case in for mention on Friday. Ingrid Miley, RTE News, at the Supreme Court in Dublin.
This evening's 6-1. You may recall that story we covered some time back of the elderly Blackhall sisters evicted from their home at Blackrock in County Dublin. Well, it may be nearing a resolution.
Fundraising in now other news from abroad. Rare good news for Britain's struggling saga of the elderly Blackhall sisters evicted from their County Dublin home last month may be resolved without further intervention by the courts. This morning, the senior counsel acting for Eileen and Rose Blackhall asked the Supreme Court to adjourn the case for 3 weeks and said the case may be resolved without troubling the court. Previously, the High Court ruled that the property should be sold to a developer for £400,000.
81-year-old Rose Blackhall was back in court this morning. this time optimistic that a way can be found so that she and her sister Eileen can return to the family home at Merino Park in Blackrock for the remainder of their lives. The two sisters were evicted from the house last month after 7 years of court battles over 2 wills made by their mother. The second will stated that the house should be sold and the proceeds split between the 4 family members. The sister and brother have since died. Gerard Blackhall's share then passed to his widow Iris. Rows over the sale of the property have continued since, and last year the High Court ruled that it should be sold to a developer for £400,000. Rose Blackhall was saying little today about the behind-the-scenes negotiations that may finally resolve this bitter dispute. But is she prepared to let the house go finally?
Oh, not really. We lived out of stick and stone in Merino Park.
When the case was mentioned in the Supreme Court this morning, the senior counsel acting for the two Blackhall sisters, Dr. Michael Ford, sought a 3-week adjournment. He said the case may be resolved without troubling the court. Mary Wilson, RTÉ News, the Supreme Court.
Their Dublin home last September were back in the Supreme Court this morning. Counsel for Rose and Eileen Blackhall, aged 81 and 86 respectively, said the case was about to be settled and asked for it to be removed from the list for the present. But counsel for their sister-in-law, Iris Blackhall, said no offer had been made to her. The court adjourned the case for 2 weeks.
The background to the litigation involving Rose and Eileen Blackhall, their mother's will, their house at Merino Park in Blackrock and their sister-in-law Iris goes back not just weeks but decades. Things finally came to a head when the sisters were evicted in September on foot of a court order that the property be sold to a builder and the proceeds distributed between Rose and Eileen, aged 81 and 86 respectively, and their late brother's wife Iris. Since then, the sisters say they've been seeking to negotiate a settlement. They're now living with cousins. This morning, their counsel, Dr. Michael Ford, told the Supreme Court that the case seemed to be about to settle and asked for it to be removed from the list for the present. But Caroline Costello BL, appearing for the Blackhall sister-in-law Iris, said that no offer had been made to her. Another barrister, Brian Leonard, intervened on behalf of Brendan Maloney, the solicitor ordered by the courts to carry out the sale of Merino Park to the builder. He voiced concern that these latest proceedings could delay completion of the sale. But the Chief Justice, Liam Hamilton, said that the court would not do anything to restrain Mr. Maloney from his work. The case was adjourned for mention until Friday, December the 18th. Ingrid Miley, RTÉ News at the Supreme Court.
Now more today's home news.
2 elderly sisters evicted from their Dublin home 2 months ago were back in the Supreme Court today. Counsel for Rose and Eileen Blackhall asked that the case be removed from the list for the present. The Supreme Court granted the motion. It's understood negotiations are continuing between the parties.
It was late October when Eileen and Rose Blackhall, aged 86 and 81 respectively, were evicted from their Blackrock home, Merino Park. The house had been at the centre of a protracted legal wrangle going back decades, involving the sisters, their late brother, and eventually his widow Iris. The High Court ordered that the house be sold to a builder for £400,000 so that its cash value could be realised and split between the parties. The sisters objected, and eventually the eviction followed. Since then, the sisters have appeared in the Supreme Court on a number of occasions in an attempt to resolve this dispute. Today, the sisters' counsel, Dr. Michael Ford, asked the Supreme Court to remove the case from the list with liberty to re-enter. The Chief Justice, Mr. Justice Hamilton, agreed to remove it from the list for the moment. Caroline Costello BL for Iris Blackhall sought an order for costs. However, the court said it had no jurisdiction to award costs. It said the case was not properly before it, as no proper notice of appeal had been served. It's unclear whether this will be the last court appearance involving the Blackhall sisters and the Merino Park house. It's understood negotiations between the parties are continuing. No further court appearances have been scheduled in the immediate future. Ingrid Miley, RTÉ News at the Supreme Court.